Welcome to the Female VC Lab podcast. Thanks again to Milken. I'm here at the Milken 2024 Global Conference, and I have Amy here. Amy, in one line, give me your name, your title, and your area of impact.
Yes. Hello. My name is Amy Hepburn. I am the CEO of the Investor Leadership Network. The Investor Leadership Network was founded during the 2018 G7 and represents 14 of the largest institutional investors globally that represent over 10 trillion assets under management that focus on climate, diversity, and private capital mobilization.
What inspired you to start this investor network, and how does one go about doing that?
Yes, the Investor Leadership Network was founded, as I mentioned, in the 2018 G7, and then I joined them in 2020 as their first CEO to set up the secretariat and to establish their operations. But my background previously, interestingly, I think, was actually in girls' education work, in gender equality, and humanitarian initiatives. So my pathway to working with private finance and working in private capital was not obvious when I was first approached by this job. But the mentor who really convinced me to take it made a comment that was incredibly impactful to me at the time and said, for every issue, Amy, you have been working on, for every issue that you deeply care about, the alignment of private capital is going to get us across the finish line. So this is an important area of focus for my efforts and my time at this stage of my career.
You know what? It's often the non-traditional routes that are so interesting to the people that listen to this podcast, because no one has a traditional route. Everyone has their path and way they got into what they're doing. How do you think that what you do related to gender lensed and clean tech and green tech economy will impact venture capital or impact the world in general? And how will it be in addition to how venture capital work or capital markets or investing will work in general?
Going back to the idea that the alignment of private capital and the role of private capital to simultaneously honor fiduciary responsibilities, to minimize risks and maximize opportunity, but to also drive lasting impact and change is truly at, in my opinion, a flashpoint, right? I think now the people have really come to look at private capital to see all the good it can do, and also to not only look at it as minimizing risk, but also maximizing opportunity. So when I look at venture capital, and particularly female-led venture capital initiatives, I think about the opportunity to bring innovation to the forefront and to bring a new way of thinking that we're not seeing in traditional investment initiatives, and a new way of collaborating and a new way of truly innovating on issues that previously may have been ignored. And that's where I think we really need to dive down on the potential of venture capital and really focus on the opportunity of diversity in this space, the opportunity of diverse thought in this space, and how, in the work I do, I really spend a lot of time thinking, how do we best support that?
And that's wonderful. Yeah. I think that's important to hear, because we all know about the gaps. So the Milken conferences, this is a side question. Sorry, Amy. Sometimes that happens.
I like side
conference kind of theme is creating shared future. So how do you see what you're doing tie into that theme?
I think a shared future is an inclusive future, full stop.
Okay.
And I think when I look at the work we're doing at ILN from the get-go, for instance, when we first set up the secretariat in 2020, in the inauspicious March of 2020, when the world was shutting down, and
many things happened in 2020.
Yes. And ILN dug its heels in and said, no, this is the perfect time for us to really both establish our work and to grow our impact. And one of the initiatives we took on was one around inclusive finance, and specifically in our diversity pillar, looking at how do we, as organizations, as institutional investors, asset owners, and asset managers, not only influence our organizations and attract diverse talent and help that diverse talent thrive and influence our decision-making and our investments, but how do we then therefore influence the industry writ large? And that work really has continued over the last 4 years. If anything, it has just gained steam.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
And know.
Yeah. I think if you think about as investors, the business case for diversity, the business case for being inclusive in your community and your culture is really solid, right?
Yeah.
The research has caught up. I think I've been in this work long enough that there was, for a while, you felt like you were just knocking on brick
Knocking up
wall
against a
or,
brick wall.
exactly, knocking on empty doors, really trying to make this case that diversity mattered and that diversity was material. Right?
Yes.
That your business with diverse leadership, with diverse thought, with diverse conversations was going to be a better business.
Yes.
And your operations were going to be stronger and your bottom line was going to be more robust.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. So back on track now on questions,
sorry.
Amy.
Yeah. Good.
What are you currently reading or learning or listening to these days?
Oh, gosh. A big part of my job is staying apprised of all geopolitical conversations. On the regular, I love to cover from the New York Times. I live in Washington, D.C., from covering the Washington Post, from following our politics. This is a big year. This is a big year across
a lot of things
the globe.
Have been happening,
Half the global population will be going to the polls. So I think that is something that I'm thinking about at night. And what does this mean for our geopolitical stability? What does this mean for our economy? What does this mean for human rights? What does this mean for women, particularly as we go forward? So that's something I think a lot about for fun. I love a good podcast. I listen to a variety of ones, from Arthur Brooks on happiness to Brene Brown to those, in terms of really thinking about how one can choose to lead with authenticity and can bring those along in an inclusive way.
That's wonderful. Here's the real bonus question, which I always ask everyone, and everyone expects this one. In 2 years, how do you see your network helping to evolve and change capital markets?
Yeah, this is a big part of why I wake up in the morning.
Okay.
Right. Is really trying to figure out, how do we have tangible, meaningful impact, not just on our member organizations, but on the industry writ large, on the financial industry writ large. And I will say, in the 4 years that I've been in my role as CEO, I've seen change. I've seen change on topics from private capital mobilization and blended finance and bringing new partnerships to the table. I see a willingness for private capital to go to COP. I see a willingness for private capital to be included, not just at the end of the problem statement, but actually be involved to co-create solutions. So what I want to see, and what I want the Investor Leadership Network to be a part of, is helping shape this co-creation moment with public and private actors all the way across the financial ecosystem, all the way across the capital stack, from venture on, and really thinking, who is at the table, who is making the decisions, and how do we look around that table in 2 years and say, those seats are filled with more diverse voices than we've ever had before. Because that is not only going to make a more robust global economy, that is going to make a better society that we all want to live in, that 100%. Is empowered from the ground up.
100%. Amy, how do people contact you?
Oh, the people can contact me a couple ways. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You could reach out to me at our website, which is at www.investorleadershipnetwork.org, or feel free to email me at amy_hepburn@investorleadershipnetwork.org. I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. We'll have many of those in the show notes. All right. Thank you so much, Amy Hepburn from the Investor Leadership Network.
Thank you
for being my guest on the Female VC Lab.